box. While waiting for the test results that would determine if he needed another round of chemotherapy at Kansas University Medical Center, he was a guest of Monsignor McKendry, pastor of Our Lady of Mercy Church. The parish was located in the forgotten sector of Kansas City, several hundred miles south of Holyoke, Iowa, where Tom was stationed. The neighborhood had been officially designated by a former mayor's task force as the gang zone. Monsignor always took Saturday afternoon confession, but because of the blistering heat, his advanced age, the broken air conditioner, and a conflict in his schedule, the pastor was busy preparing for his reunion with two friends from his seminary days at Assumption Abbey. Tom had volunteered for the duty. He had assumed he'd sit face to face with his penitent in a room with a couple of windows open for fresh air. McKendry, however, bowed to the preferences of his faithful parishioners, who stubbornly clung to the old-fashioned way of hearing confessions. A fact Tom learned only after he'd offered his services, and Lewis, the parish handyman, had directed him to the oven he would sit in for the next 90 minutes. In appreciation, Monsignor had loaned him a thoroughly inadequate, battery-operated fan that one of his flock had put in the collection basket. The thing was no bigger than the size of a man's hand. Tom adjusted the angle of the fan so that the air would blow directly on his face, leaned back against the wall, and began to read the Holyoke Gazette he'd brought along to Kansas City with him. He turned to the society page on the back first, because he got such a kick out of it. He glanced over the usual club news and the smattering of announcements. 2 births, 3 engagements, and a wedding. And then he found his favorite column, called About Town. The headline was always the same: the bingo game. The number of people who attended the community center bingo night was reported along with the names of the winners of the $25 jackpots. Interviews with the lucky recipients followed, telling what each of them planned to do with his or her windfall. And there was always a comment from Rabbi David Spears, who organized the weekly event, about what a good time everyone had. Tom was suspicious that the society editor, Lorna Hamburg, secretly had a crush on Rabbi Dave, a widower, and that was why the bingo game was so prominently featured in the paper. The rabbi said the same thing every week, and Tom invariably ribbed him about that when they played golf together on Wednesday afternoons. Since Dave usually beat the socks off him, he didn't mind the teasing, but he did accuse Tom of trying to divert attention from his appalling game. The rest of the column was dedicated to letting everyone in town know who was entertaining company and what they were feeding them. If the news that week was hard to come by, Lorna filled in the space with popular recipes. There weren't any secrets in Holyoke. The front page was full of news about the proposed town square development and the upcoming 100-year celebration at Assumption Abbey. And there was a nice mention about his sister helping out at the Abbey. The reporter called her a tireless and cheerful volunteer and went into some detail describing all the projects she had taken on. Not only was she going to organize all the clutter in the attic for a garage sale, but she was also going to transfer all the information from the old dusty files onto the newly donated computer. And when she had a few minutes to spare, she would be translating the French journals of Father Henri Van Kirk, a priest who had died recently. Tom chuckled to himself as he finished reading the glowing testimonial to his sister. Laurent hadn't actually volunteered for any of the jobs. She just happened to be walking past the abbot at the moment he came up with the ideas, and, gracious to a fault, she hadn't refused. By the time Tom finished reading the rest of the Gazette, his soaked collar was sticking to his neck. He put the paper on the seat next to him, mopped his brow again, and contemplated closing shop 15 minutes early. He gave up the idea almost as soon as it entered his mind. He knew that if he left the confessional early, he'd catch hell from Monsignor, and after the hard day of manual labor he'd put in, he simply wasn't up to a lecture. On the first Wednesday of every 3rd month, Ash Wednesday he silently called it, Tom moved in with Monsignor McKendry, an old, broken-nosed